They say the gods speak through thunder, but sometimes they whisper through blood. And tonight, Rome sleeps beneath a sky that smells like burning silk. No screams, just the muffled hush of sandals on marble halls and the sound of a boy's breath held too long beneath a golden mask. He is 14 and beautiful and silent, not because he chooses to be, but because his voice was taken weeks ago with a bronze knife and oil. Outside the palace, the city laughs, drinks, eats, prays, but within these crimson walls, children bleed so the emperor can believe in his divinity. No one speaks his real name here. They call him the Rose of the East, the painted god, the consort of the moon, and worse things. He came from Syria with incense and thunder, promised to remake Rome in the image of the sun. Brought shadows instead, shadows and screams. The Senate cursed him. The priests feared him, the soldiers obeyed him because his eyes glittered like knives, and he loved cruelty more than conquest. His name was Marcus Aurelius Antoninus on coins, but history remembers him as Elagabalus, the boy emperor who played God and tore open children. Before he sat the throne, he danced for generals in silken skirts painted like Venus, moving his hips with the grace of a temple harp. He said the gods didn't need gender, and neither did he. He shaved his body, painted his lips, and prayed naked before idols of stone and fire. But what he did behind the black doors of the Palatine was not religion, was the harvest of flesh, the breaking of innocence, the offering of blood. He ordered 200 boys selected from every province, beauty their only qualification, kidnapped, bought, or bred for the Garden of Silken Shadows. He was building. Some were taken from orphanages, some from noble homes, most from peasant fields, where their parents were told, "Your son will serve Rome in the palace." And he did, but not with honor, not with dignity. He served on silk sheets with wrists tied in golden rope and eyes wide open under moonlight. The emperor believed in ritual, believed that beauty could summon gods, that suffering could open doors between worlds, that if a boy cried just right, heaven would listen. He had a high priest who painted boys in gold leaf and lined their mouths with roses before sending them to the emperor's chamber, barefoot, perfumed, and afraid. This was tea madness, not the kind you treat with herbs. It was worship. Gone, rancid devotion, fermented into something monstrous, something divine, and rotten. Each night, the same procession, oil lamps, swaying eunuchs, singing sweet. As one trembling child was chosen to entertain the god that bled behind the emperor's. Sometimes he would dress them as brides, sometimes as warriors. But always he demanded silence, because the emperor, said Real Buda, had no voice, no protest. In the day he would sit with senators, speak of philosophy, debate, Greek poetry, laugh over gladiator deaths. While the blood beneath his nails dried invisible, no one challenged him. Not openly, not while his mother still whispered in his ear, not while his priests burned offerings of bone in secret chambers. But in Rome, truth doesn't die. It festers, and in the gutters. Children whispered about the emperor who drank ruby wine from skulls and slept on screams. One boy tried to escape, leaped from a second-floor window. His legs shattered, the guards dragged him back, and the emperor wept not in sadness, but in fury. He ordered the boy's mouth sewn shut, then kissed his stitched lips and told the court he had never seen anything so holy as a silenced angel. The garden where the boys lived was surrounded by marble, walls carved with vines and doves. But inside the roses grew redder than they should have. Each rose was named after a boy who had disappeared. Sometimes petals would fall like teeth. Other times the vines would scratch the eunuchs who walked too close. No one watered them, yet they bloomed more each year. And some said the emperor had buried parts of the children beneath the roots to keep them flowering. He called it his Eden, and he said it was proof that pain could make beauty and that Rome had grown too weak to understand sacrifice. Visiting noble once asked about the garden and was never seen again. His horses returned without him. His tongue was later found in a bowl of fruit, and night servants swore they heard laughter from the garden. Laughter that wasn't human, and once a scream that didn't stop even after the sun rose. The emperor began to wear robes, stitched with boy hair, claimed it protected him from demons, and sometimes he'd enter the Senate wrapped in this hideous garment, smiling. He told his council that the gods demanded another temple, a temple of pain, where no sound could enter, but every wound would sing. Some senators began to resign, others vanished their estates, confiscated their daughters gifted to the palace to train as priestesses of the sun cult. By year 4 of his reign, the palace reeked of perfume and death, and the emperor spoke less in Latin, more in tongues no one recognized. He spent hours in his chamber stroking the hair of dead boys, calling them his sacred choir, and weeping when their eyes began to rot. One physician reported that the emperor had begun to collect the hearts of his favorites, placing them in silver bowls around his bath, calling them his stars. He would bathe with them, speak to them, tell them secrets about heaven, about how the gods could only hear prayers whispered through suffering. And always he demanded more beauty, more body, more boys who could not scream, because silence was the only prayer he trusted. The garden grew lusher and the roses darker, and the emperor began to sleep with the windows open so the smell of blood could enter his dreams. He claimed a god visited him nightly, not in light, but in a body with too many eyes. and that it asked for more sacrifices, more silence. One night, a new boy arrived, taken from Alexandria. With skin like onyx and eyes like polished stone, the emperor called him a gift from the Nile gods. He lasted 3 nights before disappearing, and the next day the emperor wore a necklace of polished teeth and told his priests the river had spoken. The Senate finally began to whisper. The guards began to question the priests, began to falter, and the empire itself trembled beneath the weight of its hidden gods. But in the heart of the palace, the emperor danced alone in blood-soaked robes, promising the sun he would build a choir of silence that never ended. And the boys still came dragged in, from every edge of the empire, perfumed, shaved, painted, broken, and offered to a god who once wore a crown. And so the choir grew, not in voice, but in number, boys without names. Without futures, trained to move like smoke, to breathe without sound. Every new moon, the emperor would sit on a throne carved from elephant bone and select a favorite to wear the crown of petals and ash. This crown was not an honor. It marked the chosen one for that week. Private ritual, a night of wine, opium, incense, and something worse. In the hall of lamps where shadows flickered like drowning souls, the emperor would undress the child slowly, like peeling fruit with gold-tipped fingers. He would whisper verses in languages no longer spoken, ask questions that made no sense. And if the boy cried, he'd smile and call it music, but changed. Their eyes became glassy, their smiles stretched too far, their minds left behind, somewhere cold. The castrations were performed by the imperial doctor, a silent man with trembling hands and a white robe always stained at the wrist. The emperor laughed, offered him a glass of pomegranate wine that tasted like rust, and regret some boys died during the operation. Lived later, his headless body was found near the temple of Saturn wrapped in silk. The emperor said he could hear angels when they screamed beneath the blade, that their blood wrote messages from the gods. Across his floors of mirrors, it was built underground beneath the palace, where no light from the sun could reach. A senator once dared to ask about the disappearances within days. That senator's youngest son was taken in a week. He performed the rites, the secret acts he believed would make him eternal, not through glory, not through battle, but through blood and silence, through the palace like the breath of the dead. Some said it drove the emperor deeper into madness, others said it summoned gods. The Senate fell silent. After that, silence became law. Silence became Rome's new language, taught in gardens, in schools, in the palaces of ashen perfume, of choir boys, and wrought his body smeared with black ash and goat's blood. Declaring himself the living sun, the mouth of all forgotten gods, the emperor began designing a new room called the chamber, her voice long since lost to whatever pact she had made for her son's throne to gain power, that her womb bore, not a boy, but a vessel, a cursed relic in human skin. He was caught before reaching the gates and fed to the emperor's pet lions. The walls were made of polished obsidian, the ceiling of black crystal, the floor a mosaic of bones arranged in sacred geometry. Like stars, he brought the boys. There, one at a time, forced them to look at their reflections, told them they were divine, and kissed their trembling hands. More violent his demands, more absurd. Once he ordered a senator's wife to be shaved, painted, and whipped like the choir boys were made to wash him. While singing songs of victory and light as sacred incense in bathhouses, they said the emperor was not a god, but a beast in silk. In the garden began to wither black at the edges. Some bloomed with worms, some bled when cut, some opened with teeth. How easily beauty became death, how quickly children vanished, how blood became Rome's perfume. In this room, the choir would stand outside the chamber in rows, humming a low note taught to them by a dying eunuch whose tongue had been burned off, their names erased from Roman record as if they had never existed. The same note as the choir, eyes wide, hands twitching, speaking to gods no one else could see. The emperor screamed for days, blood soaking the black floor until the bones turned red. This hum never stopped, it vibrated. The choir would mimic him there, humming, broken, haunting, hollow, and fire with wings made of stitched skin and gold thread. He claimed he no longer needed generals or priests, that he could see the future in the spilled intestines of virgins, in the cutthroats found hanging from fig trees, their fingers missing, their eyes removed with surgical precision. More silence issued an edict that every province must offer one child per season as tribute to the living sun he painted. His eyelids with crushed rubies, his lips with the blood of swans, his skin with oils that smelled of honey. One night, he emerged naked from the chamber, declared the boy general a gift, and promised to wear his skin as a cloak, had turned away and left him hollow in his eternal lungs. His mother watched from the shadows, her face hidden, her hands clasped. Some whispered that she too had sacrificed children. A scribe tried to flee the palace with a scroll detailing the rituals. His bones were crushed and used in the emperor's bath. The water turned pink. The boys... At night, the emperor paced his halls barefoot, humming. He called for more boys, more voices. Those who refused had their homes burned, their daughters taken in. Gaul, a rebellion sparked. Led by a general whose own son had vanished into the palace, he marched toward Rome with fury and prayer. The emperor welcomed the news through a feast in the Garden of Roses. He grew careless, his ritual When she died from blood loss, he said the gods were angry and slit the throats of 10 boys as apology, offering their screams. The people of Rome began to whisper behind closed doors in wine shops. They feared his madness, but feared the silence more. Feared the roses. One child was born within the palace, a son of a servant girl and an unknown father. He cried too loud, so the emperor had his tongue removed. The child lived in the walls, crawling like a rat, singing through his wounds. The chamber of mirrors cracked one night after a ritual went wrong. He claimed that God had touched him, a true God, not the sun, but something older, something that lives beneath marble and feeds on memory. He began to dream of pits filled with singing mouths of children who floated through smoke. His priests began to vanish, one by one, their robe. And still, the boys kept coming, carried in wagons, gilded and chained, perfumed, and weeping. The garden never empty, the silence never broken. He said he could not die, that the gods had made him immortal, that every boy who bled was another breath. But his body told a different story. It trembled, spasmed, his skin bruised, his eyes bled in sleep, and his hands never stopped shaking. The head physician begged to release the boys, said the rituals were poisoning the emperor. Blood said the gods for his mercy. The emperor flayed him alive in front of the choir maid. The boys singing, as the flesh was peeled, made them dance on his skin. Then he laughed and said, "This is Rome, and in Rome, gods must be fed." But not all gods stay silent. Some leave marks on the skin, others crawl into dreams and whisper commands. Until madness becomes obedience, and blood becomes worship, the emperor began hearing voices. Beneath the floor, not voices of men or boys, but of old things that had never been born, and could never die. He claimed they spoke in rhythms like dripping blood and bone, cracking under silk. He followed their words. Deeper into cruelty, deeper into godhood, he renamed the palace. The womb of fire, and ordered murals of screaming children, painted across every ceiling using the blood of the most beautiful boys. The walls of the chamber of mirrors turned black from and screams. Every step echoed like a prayer in reverse. Every breath hung heavy like rot. The choir now sang without tongues, their throats carved to silence the imperfections, their hands bound in gold chains as they swayed and sobbed in rhythm. One boy too young to bleed was chosen for the emperor's ritual. The chamber shook that night, the lamps burst, and no one spoke his name. In the city markets, rumors began to fester like wounds. They said the emperor bathed in milk and blood. They said he slept with the dead and fed on hearts. His mother disappeared. No funeral, no procession. Just a trace of perfume on a staircase and a silver comb found soaked in something darker than wine, the emperor claimed. She had ascended, became one with the god he served. He placed her robe on a statue and kissed his feet daily with ash on his lips. He stopped attending court, stopped pretending to rule, and began spending every waking hour among the boys, the choir, the flayed, and the silent. He whispered to them secrets of gods that predated Rome, gods made of bone and shadow, demanded innocence as offering. In silence as song, the empire strained at the edges. Wars bloomed in the north, drought scorched the grain in Egypt, rebellions sparked in Africa. But the emperor did not care. He said, Rome was not land or people, Rome was pain made holy, and only those who bled properly could claim to understand its divinity. The choir had grown thin, their bodies more bone than skin, their eyes glazed with opium and grief. They moved like ghosts painted gold and draped in threadbare velvet. One boy tried to run, leaping from a balcony into the sea below. He was caught before he hit the water, his legs shattered and replaced with chains. He became a pet, dragged through the halls by the emperor's eunuchs, forced to smile, forced to sing, his broken mouth stretched until it tore. The emperor kissed the scars and whispered he was perfect, that his suffering pleased the gods more than all the armies of Rome. A general returned from the Eastern Front, bearing news of a lost legion. He saw the state of the palace and fled the city. Disguised as a beggar, senators met in shadowed rooms, debating what to do, but none dared speak too loudly for fear their own sons might be chosen next in the temple of Mars. A priest hung himself from the rafters, carving the words, "The sun is bleeding," into his chest. Before he died, the emperor danced barefoot across the forum one morning, drenched in blood, holding the severed head of a boy high above his crown, declaring the gods were fed. The people watched and said nothing. The guards bowed their heads, and the sun beat down as if ashamed to shine on what Rome had become. A girl from a nearby village was brought to the palace dressed as a boy, her beauty unmatched, her fear bound in silk. She lasted one night. Her screams were muffled by the choir. Her body left in the garden of broken statues, where weeds grew through stone and teeth. The emperor did not sleep. He walked through the palace, touching each boy's forehead, whispering numbers as if counting lives is currency for eternal life. He began referring to himself not as emperor, but as the mouth of silence, the vessel through which the gods tasted beauty and spat out ruin. The palace kitchens prepared only black foods, charred olives, dried blood meat soaked in ink and tears, served on plates carved from human bone. The feast silent. The choir, standing in corners, the emperor weeping as he ate each bite, with trembling hands and laughing between mouthfuls. No mirrors were allowed in the upper halls anymore, only in the chamber below, where his reflection no longer showed his face. But something hollow and shifting a boy once said he saw horns in the mirror growing from the emperor. Said he vanished that same night, and his voice was heard no more in desperation. One senator sent his son away dressed as a servant, hidden in a merchant escort. But the emperor found out. He ordered the senator's family burned alive in their own villa, their screams echoing down the Tiber, the river turning red for 3 days. The emperor told the choir, this was music, this was power, this was Rome's heartbeat made pure through flame and grief. One servant was caught praying to Jupiter. He was disemboweled publicly, and his entrails used to spell divine truths across the floor. The children who were born in the palace knew no outside world. They played with skulls as toys and danced to dirt. Instead of lullabies, the emperor announced a wedding between himself and the god beneath the earth. The ceremony held in the catacombs among bones and weeping slaves. He wore a robe made of stitched skin, the choir sang through slit throats, and the officiant was a blind eunuch, whose eyes were once his own. After the vows, he declared every new moon would be marked by sacrifice and silence, that the empire's strength came from suffering, not from coin or conquest. A strange plague began spreading among the palace staff. Their eyes rotted from the inside, their skin bloomed with boils, shaped like faces screaming in miniature. Still, the emperor sang still. He danced still. He took more boys, each one thinner, more silent, more empty than the last. Some whispered that he no longer ate food, only drank blood and perfume that his touch left. Bruises shaped like suns, and his voice drove men mad. One boy from Hispania began to twitch uncontrollably. After spending a night with him, his arms twisted backwards, his tongue split like a snake. When asked what he saw, the boy laughed for 6 hours, then fell dead without a wound. The emperor called it a holy gift, and in the gardens the roses turned black and thornless and wept. Do that smelt like rot and memory? But marble cannot silence the screams carved beneath it, nor can gold cover the rot that coils through the foundations of a palace built on pain. One night the emperor declared the moon had spoken to him. He summoned the youngest of the boys and offered his soul in crimson silence. They brought the child in chains, perfumed and weeping. The emperor kissed his feet, placed a ruby crown on his head, and snapped his neck like wood. The smoke filled the garden for days. Children in the choir fainted from the smell. The body was burned in a furnace built of ivory bones. Servants began vanishing, not just boys, but women, guards, priests, cooks. They were found weeks later, their limbs ripped, their faces sewn onto the wrong skulls. The emperor said it was art that pain made him see the gods clearer. That flesh was the scripture only he had been chosen to read. He wore robes of red, stitched with human hair, bathed in goat milk, dyed with ashes. He said it kept him pure, clean of earthly thought. He demanded a new ritual each night. The boys lined up, nude, painted with silver powder, told to hum a hymn no one else recognized. Those who hummed wrong were punished with scalding and fed to the fish in the bathhouse. The emperor laughed and danced alone in the blood. Oil or dragged into the furnace room to witness the purification of those who displeased the emperor's god. Parthia arrived with gifts, gold spices, fine carpets. The emperor refused them and instead asked for boys with eyes like frost-black stone, etched with the names of the boys who had pleased him most. The youngest names glowed brightest that way, full of music and prophecy. The emperor made him high priest of the unspoken altar. You have desecrated the altars. Your soul is smoke, your throne is bone. Your gods are not ours. They will devour you. First, when the diplomat hesitated, his tongue was cut out and dried flowers, shaped like open mouths. It was never quiet there. Echoed up into the Senate. Chamber senators looked away, knowing well what sacrifices kept their coins and gardens safe. Tongues bled and eyes wept. The priests of Jupiter finally sent a warning, disguised as a poem delivered by a blind girl whose mouth had been sewn shut since birth. Banqueted read. The emperor painted the message on his back in ink and forced the choir to lick it clean, laughing as there. He ordered new columns carved from solid Rome. Sweltered fires no longer warmed the halls. Only the emperor's breath misted the air like winter, creeping through history, open like fruit, and fed to the others as part of the ritual of eternal humility. No one recognized words that made servants cry, and walls bleed, small cracks forming around every doorframe. A heretic fed his ashes to the dogs, then ordered every mirror in the city destroyed to prevent reflection of impurity. He began sleeping in a coffin filled with rose thorns and salt. He claimed dreams came clearer, a sun on the chest and a moon on the thigh, depending on their function. Vanished, his fingers blackened. He claimed he had married death and was now divine. Eyes dulled, backs curved as if bearing invisible weight. Their hands, always trembling, bent against his skin. That he drank poison for pleasure and wept lightning at dusk. One boy survived the ritual by not moving, not blinking. He was called the Silent One. The temple door is a sign of divine favor. His bones are still there beneath the marble, sometimes sobbing and asking why they left him before the ritual was complete. The altar was underground, carved into an old act, covered in wax candles. Who served longest began to dream of drowning in honey, their mouths filled with bees, their eyes stitched shut with silver thread. A god. Sometimes the screams from below, sacred, and demanded they be recorded in scrolls written with ink, mixed from ash tears and the blood of the silent one. A noblewoman who tried to protest was dragged naked through the streets, her eyes removed and placed in the emperor's swine. For that night, the emperor began painting with blood, creating murals that moved when no one watched. They showed boys floating in rivers, their mouths open in song. He invited guests to view them, and those who did too long were said to vanish in their sleep, their bodies never found. Only Ash the Silent One began to speak in tongues, languages. The palace grew colder, though his hair turned white. Though he was still young, his pupils, he demanded a living crown, forged of boys still breathing, fused with wax and gold, carried on their shoulders. He sat atop them like those who collapsed under his weight were split. A choir boy bit his tongue in half to avoid singing again. The emperor had it sewn back and forced him to hum through the blood. Rumors reached the people that the emperor could not die, that Blades one soldier tried to assassinate him at prayer. His knife melted in his hand, his mouth sealed shut. He burst into flame as the choir watched. The emperor declared him. Boys were no longer named, just numbered, each branded with those with both symbols. Were taken nightly to the sanctum, and returned changed. The emperor made statues of them. Afterward, dressed in silk and posed in silent screams, displayed in gardens beside blackened roses and hummingbird bones, he would spend hours alone with those statues, whispering prayers, stroking their hair. A senator's son was sent as tribute. He returned 3 days later, unable to speak, with his skin replaced in patches by gold leaf and candle wax. He wandered the alleys 4 weeks before collapsing in front of the Forum, carving the words, "Help them into the stones," with his bare bleeding fingers. The emperor declared him a prophet and nailed him to the boys. The emperor called these dreams. A great banquet was held to mark the 199th boy. The emperor wept with joy and announced the next would become the godchild and enter his flesh. The boy chosen was 6 years old, his name never spoken, his body wrapped in pearls, his smile frozen by wine, and whispered. That night lightning struck the outer walls and the roses. Screamed every mirror, cracked the silent one, collapsed whispering, "The time is near, the time is now." But even the gods tire of their vessels, even silence cracks. Even the empire built on pain must one day answer to the dead. It buried on the night of the 200th boy, the palace walls bled oil. The black roses withered to choir, hummed without breath. The emperor dressed in bone. Robe was stitched from boy skin, soaked in milk, his crown made from teeth of the silent ones. He entered the sanctum barefoot and shaking only from the forgotten flesh. As he said, the final ritual would open the gate. He said Rome would be reborn from blood, not laws, not legions, but from ecstasy. The crowd, silent like corpses. The boy chosen stood trembling beneath a veil of spider silk, his chest marked with ancient letters. No scholar recognized his eyes, already lost to fear. The emperor raised a dagger made from meteor iron, carved with runes, his hand shaking, not from guilt. The ceiling bled. The emperor fell back, clutching his eyes, saying, they burn with light he was not meant to see. But before the blade fell, the candles died, not from wind, not from movement, but as if the room itself decided it had seen enough. The statues screamed, not the boys, not the guards, but the statues. They howled like wolves, and the mirrors shattered, though none had been seen for months. From the corners of the sanctum rose voices, not loud, not angry, but soft whispering names. Names the emperor had erased, names that had no tombs. Where memory had returned, the floor cracked, where the roses bloomed black, he kissed. The soil he whispered prayers, but the earth rejected him. It pulsed with hunger. But the guards had become crows, their eyes red, their wings made of broken lyres and skin. Where the pigs were once kept, but the passage was gone, swallowed by stone, dripping with memory and rotted walls, called himself. Divine screamed, he was Goddess vessel, but no voice answered, only the sound of the furnace doors opening once more, but split wide with truth that cannot be killed by ritual. The choir wept, but did not move. The guards turned to salt, the black roses bloomed, and from their petals came tiny voices chanting, you are seen. But it was not fire that burned, it was memories. Turned sharp and holy, cutting through his stolen robes, his own but centuries old. The silent one rose from the ash, his mouth torn, open, not stitched, not sealed, every act he had buried, cracked. He pointed to the emperor, and the air froze, the ground hissed, and every step the emperor took left behind blood. Not now, fully changed. Not a boy, not a god, but the echo of all those who had been forgotten by Rome, just rot. He begged for the gods to speak, but they had grown silent. He asked for mercy. but there was no room for pity and pearls, leading to the sewer where a single child's whisper echoed. Never seen again? Some say he became a prophet, others say he returned to the villages to gather more stories from the lost emperor called Castrated. Its halls buried under marble and silence, its rooms emptied, but never truly cleaned. I remember you, he screamed for his mother who had vanished into dust. He called for his favorite boy, who had drowned beneath the golden bath. His voice, in his spine, snapped one by one slowly. Now weeping, they laid him on the stone slab where once he offered others. Now he was the gift. From every column came faces. Faces of boys never buried, only burned boys who had sung in silence and died in fire. They now watched in stillness. The emperor ran to the garden in history. He ordered the guards to take him to the temple. He tried to flee through the kitchen. I was not a goddess gift, I was a child, and I remember he clawed not the names carved in statues, but the voices that were almost erased. From time he descended into the old chamber, where he had danced, where he had named himself King of Pain, and found it filled with ashen teeth. A mirror appeared cracked but unbroken, showing not his reflection, but every boy he had touched their eyes, locked their mouths, stitched and glowing with justice. Do not run, do not pray, just listen, for even in death, even in silence, a child's voice never forgets, he screamed. But the sound fell dead in his throat. A hand reached out. Not flesh, but shadow. It pressed against his chest and pushed. He fell back into the furnace room. The silent one walked forward. He whispered one sentence, and the emperor began to bleed not from wounds, but from every place. A name had been silenced. His blood crawled upward, staining the ceiling. His tongue swelled with voices that were not his. The bones, his crown fell shattering into dust. The teeth turned to ash. The robes caught flame, not from fire, but from the weight of unspoken pain. He was lifted, not by angels, not by soldiers, but by shadows of boys' arms, wrapped around him gently, like he had once demanded they dance. They carried him to the garden of statues. His chest opened without blade, his heart pulled out, still beating, covered in gold. It cracked in two, and inside was nothing. Not light, not truth, the sky above. Rome turned black, not night, but memory. The Tiber ran backwards, and the bells of the forgotten temples rang once more. His body was never found, only a trail of milk. The silent one vanished. The palace was sealed by the next. Some nights they say if you walk near the ruins and close your eyes, you will hear the choir still humming through bloodless lips. The names of the boys never recorded now scratched into stones that no one reads, carved behind fountains, whispered by wind through dead gardens. Rome remembered only the emperor's badness, not the suffering that fed it. The empire built on gods, and pain refused to etch their victims. But the scrolls remained one, written by a boy who escaped, who survived, who taught others to write, who whispered truth into the cracks of time. It ends with a single line scratched by hand beneath dried blood. You have heard his story, now not the emperor. If you still hear their humming tonight,